What's up, everybody, and welcome to an all-new Thunderchat. I'm Toy Addict, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, David Igo from Tweeterhead Studios. What's up, David?
Hey guys, how's it going?
All right, man. So we're really excited because today is the official launch date of the new Panthro exclusive 1/5 scale maquette from you guys. And tell me a little bit about that. I mean, we were talking behind the scenes a little bit, and you mentioned how it's been a long road to get this out there. So let's start off with that.
Yeah, so actually, this kind of goes back to, I'm creative director at Tweeterhead, and we make statues of nerdy stuff, primarily DC, He-Man, and we have like a license with Elvira and stuff. And Chad, the owner, and I have been working with each other since I was at my previous job at Sideshow. Sideshow was super cool with me working on He-Man stuff with them, trying to get that going because we had the license, then we didn't. Chad wanted to kind of continue it. And so we called it Legends. So it's kind of like continuing what I started when I was at Sideshow with He-Man and then continuing that at Tweeterhead. And so we talked about doing the same thing with Thundercats, kind of like, hey, can we hit some of the characters we didn't do before? Can we, hey, if we want to offer a new lino, could we update it a little bit so it could become like not the same as the previous one? And so Chad and I were into it. Sideshow was cool with it, and we, Warner Brothers obviously has to be cool with it because it's their baby. So we approached them about doing the same thing. We're calling it Legends, and so we made the announcement in July 2020, right after like COVID, like right in the middle of COVID and everything. And we were actually already had like finished designs. We had all this stuff, and we had an approval with them. And then I was working on, this is the first project I worked on with my now friend, but at the time, just new acquaintance, Gio Nakpil, who's amazing designer, sculptor. He's worked in feature film and all this crazy stuff. And this was his actually first collectible statue ever. And we've always talked about working on something together. It's just like the right project, the right time. And he was a huge fan of Thundercat. So like, dude, we gotta do this. We talked about ideas, aesthetics, we were totally on the same page. And so, which I'll get back to in a little bit. So we had to finish sculpt in like December of 2020. And by the time we were submitting it, Warner Brothers was like, hey, this isn't actually in your contract. So there's a weird miscommunication about our contract stuff. So we went in thinking we had it and we didn't. So we had to wait till we had a renewal, which took a couple of years. And then there's still some hiccups with it a little bit. So we just had this finished Panthro sculpt sitting there for like 2 years. It's like, oh, we got to make this, But it gave us time to like really look at. We actually didn't change a single thing on it. Sometimes you do when you're an artist. You're always looking back at like older stuff, like, oh, I would have done this different. I would have done this different. So we actually looked at it with fresh eyes like earlier last year. And we're like, no, dude, we're happy with it. So we printed it. We had it painted for PowerCon. That was the first time we kind of like showed it painted. Yeah. And it was a really nice paint job by Scott Zillner, but it was definitely under a tight deadline to get it ready for PowerCon. So when we came back, we just took some extra time to kind of like finesse it and push some things and tweak some things a little bit more. And yeah, here we are. And March finally, we could have gone up earlier with it, but pre-sales never do that good. Like items are just pre-sale, never really do that good between like November and January because people want to spend their money on like things they can actually buy for gifts and have in hand. So instead of rushing it for October, we're like, let's take our time with it. Let the new year start. Make sure we have everything just right. We have the plan, and everything. So we waited till, we're going to do it end of February, but then it was crowded with something else. We moved out to mid-March and yeah, today. So finally it's here, part by accident, just like taking a while with a miscommunication, part by design, because we want to make sure Panther could shine on his own and we could work out some ideas for how to incentivize people to pre-order, because we get like there's a lot of hesitation with people with pre-ordering. It's a lot of money to put on something you have to wait 8, 10, 12 months to eventually get in hand. I mean, that you have a giant thunder tank next to you, and that was a crazy Kickstarter, like it's just there's risks about that, and that's a lot of money not to have in your pocket for a long time. So we just want to make sure, hey, let's figure this all out and go. But yeah, it was like almost a 4-year, well, actually, all in all, it was a 4-year journey from let's do this to now, so it's crazy. It's just bonkers.
That's crazy. It's been a really long road. And it's crazy because I don't know if you share the same sentiment, but I've always had this feeling where the Thundercats IP always tends to get kind of like bummed. Like it kind of gets shoved to the back, and I don't know what it is about that. Like, Bandai did the action figure line back when the cartoons came out, and that thing bombed. They couldn't get the scales right. They were just doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and then they canceled the line before they could even make everybody from the show. And then Mattel comes along and makes the huge announcement that they're doing Club Third Earth, and they're making these awesome Thundercats figures by the Four Horsemen. And then they go and announce their main
with like the classics He-Man. So it's like you have your Thundercats and He-Man toys like in scale with each other, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, I'm a huge Thundercats fan, but like, it's taken so long. You think? I mean, I don't know if you can see
Super 7. I give Super 7 so much credit for basically like injecting new life into Thundercats because of what they did with obviously the reaction figures are fun, but the Ultimates line really kind of like continued on that path. And then you have the Thunder Tank, you have Cat's Lair coming out, which I've seen in person like twice. Like I had to lift the huge
PowerCon, and I was just like mind blown.
I was one of the 4 people that helped lift that acrylic case onto it at that PowerCon. They're like, "We need people," and I'm like a tall guy, so I was one of 4 that was getting that acrylic case over that giant thing on top of a giant thing. But yeah, I mean, every once in a while you really get a champion of a property, and it was Val Staples for He-Man for the longest time. He-Man.org, rest in peace, was the place to go for He-Man fans, and especially when like the 2000X show came out, and between 2000X to like modern day, like Val was like single-handedly with a handful of other people really keeping that alive. And Thundercats didn't really have the same love. I mean, when the new show, the animated show, came out in 2011, I love that show. And I know Daniel Norton, who's an amazing artist, was like one of the like real big spearheads of that show, and it was great. And it ended with a cliffhanger, and I was so excited for season 2, and it's like, nope, not happening. It's like, what? And it's such a great reimagination. I know a lot of hardcore fans are not a fan of anything being reinterpreted in any way, shape, or form. And that's been, a hesitation with us too about like, the market's always doing this, and sometimes everyone's buying and they're not buying. But as soon as you decide to make something that's like, this is a $500 to $550 to $600 statue, and everyone has in their mind what the ultimate version of this character is going to be, they might look at what we did and go, lame. They did that, like they give him no boots, like they give him feet, like lame, it's like, all right, whatever. And it's just, those people don't realize how much like you need, even if you don't like it, like the support, even just like love for someone doing it is like imperative for the longevity of something.
It's funny because you just answered one of our first questions, which was asking exactly that, if there was a possibility of a switch out for the ninja boots.
Oh no. Like, I don't know, like a switch out on feet. Like, I don't know if that's ever happened. Like, oh, there's a thing that connects the statue. I think making a switch out, it'd be this small of a thing with a peg that's it could be done. But just to me, when I think about like the intention, right? And this goes into some people online were posting today about like their thoughts on the design and how they wish it was grittier and more dirty, or more like, oh, he's been in battle and battle damage. I'm like, their thoughts. I'm not saying I'm right? But there's things about like, you have to like make as much sense to you as possible. Right. And I think of like cat people doing like, if you watch that intro, which I love, I watch it like once every 2 weeks, like just as like a remember my childhood thing. One of the best intros of anything all time.
Absolutely.
And it's like, you just look at what they're doing. And I just like, if there's a live action movie of that, if I saw cat people knowing how real cats move, how fast they are and dexterous, and like, dude, they have a soft spine, like their entire spine can like go crazy. I know these are like humanoid versions of them. I'm just like, in what world would they not use their natural feet to just like get around and mess stuff up? I'm just like, I just couldn't imagine. Like, I just, in my head, I think of like, to the lamest reason, like putting shoes on real cats, right? Like, we never do it. And then just like, if you took a cat person, like like and put them in the wild, like an actual cat person, they would just not benefit from having things covering their feet. You know, I'm just like, so it's like, it's a weird nerdy thing. That's why we put on the foot cover at least, so it has like a little bit of that blend of the two. But I get why people would think that, but I don't know, even if they're ninja shoes or whatever, it's just like human feet and cat feet are very different. And then if a human cat foot, you could go a little bit this way or this one. I went more towards like what would make sense to me, and that's what made sense to me. So I know not a lot of people are going to agree with me. I've been talking with a bunch of friends about Dune 2 and the stuff we love about what they adapt, what they don't adapt, and how they adapt things. It's part of nerd culture, and I'm not saying everyone should agree with me, but I hope they know it wasn't just like random or because of being lazy. If anything, it's harder to sculpt really good toes, and it helped with the pose to show like the way Panthro is standing. You get a sense of like his anticipation of his motion because of those toes. It's like, I just love it. So it's not for everyone.
Yeah,
I
think it makes a lot of sense, but it's like you're coming at it from an artist perspective. You're looking at it organically. You're looking at almost like if you were developing a maquette for, proposed motion picture.
Oh, totally. Or a live action TV show or a video game. It's like it'd be hard for you to imagine if someone showed this Panthers like a live action movie's coming out and there's the design and he had cat feet. I'd be like, dude, yeah, this makes sense. But yeah, if they gave him like all this heavy tech and stuff, like now he's too bulky, he can't move. Like even like the segments on his harness, like, we could have just done like a clean harness with these spikes growing out of him. Like some sort of we actually looked at a lot of like high-end watches and stuff to like how that like overlapping and scalping of like light armor, like make it make sense, but be true to the classic as much as possible. It's like, what we try to do. And yeah, I get how some people could look at me like taking the shoes off as being like annoying, but it's what it is.
It totally makes sense. The thing is, we gotta, the the original IP is there. It's always going to be there.
Yep.
But, in order to give longevity to the IP, we got to reinvent. And, the only thing that has ever been redone or reinterpreted from Thundercats that I absolutely hated was that Thundercats Roar cartoon on Cartoon Network. That thing was like, to me, it was just like an insult to Thundercats.
The thing
it was like
because my reaction when that came out was similar, and a lot of people were posting about that. I try not to post anything negative just because you just never know what friend worked on or whatever. It's like, why? But, a friend of mine, an amazing artist, he has kids. He's like, I get why traditional fans would hate this because you want your Game of Thrones Thundercats, right? Or whatever, or your continuation of the original cartoon show, like what, He-Man Revelation did for He-Man. But, he has kids. He's like, this is maybe the gateway to introduce them to this IP that they're not ready for maybe yet, to see like adult things. Like maybe this is the thing that would bring in a new audience and introduce them to this thing. And like, don't take it as like a missed opportunity for what you wanted. Look at this as, if this succeeds, then that many more people are aware and love Thundercats. And then there's that better of a chance of your version coming out again sometime, So it's kind of like, I look at like, if you want an IP to truly be successful, it's got to be like, there's two different thoughts. There's the one, this is all it can ever be, and F everything else. This is true to my vision. Or it's got to be like accessible to like a lot of different people. Like when I think of Batman, you have Dark Knight Batman, then you have Adam West Batman, and everyone has their own, who's your favorite Batman. But at the end of the day, like people love Batman. And if Thundercats Roar gets a new audience and new eyeballs on Thundercats that wouldn't have seen it before, and it helps raise awareness and raise everything, then hopefully one day we get the next Thundercats thing that you would want, I would want, and classic hardcore fans would want, So that's how we just gotta look at it.
That's the best way to think about it. It's like, if you're a true Thundercats fan, support all the content, because then eventually you'll get the content you want. I'm thinking it's prime time right now to do a Thundercats animated series on Netflix. I think with Masters of the Universe Revelation and Revolution, that kind of proves that those types of cartoons still have a strong audience base.
I loved She-Ra. I know She-Ra was pretty polarizing, but I loved it. And Voltron, the Netflix Voltron show was amazing. So there's like, I'm hoping, you know, Netflix can be the people that could be like, hey, we were successful with He-Man, like with this, let's try that with Thundercats now. Let's continue it for like the kids that grew up with that version. Let's continue that story for them, you know? So who knows, you know?
So we got Renato Cuoto. He says, hey guys, greetings from Brazil. It seems that the Thundercats license suffers from some kind of curse. Just like what I was saying, LOL, super cool to see this line taking shape by Tweeterhead. So
Thanks.
Super talented. All the artists he is putting together, working on the Motu line, for example, has delivered incredible pieces.
Oh, thanks.
David Banner says, I get your vision makes logical sense from a real world perspective, but this is all make-believe. But I love it. It's still pretty much true to the source material, and I have to have it.
I think like that's always something that comes up, you know, like make-believe, you know, it's fantasy, do whatever you want. And we all have different thresholds for what we view as acceptable than what would pull us out, right? Like, you know, when people think of Spider-Man and then they saw the first live action Sam Raimi thing and they showed like the zoom in of the hand with like the little sticky things coming off. It's like, oh, they're giving a reason for like why his hands stick. But if his feet can stick, why would he ever put on shoes? You know, so it's like people like always bring that up like, oh, if you always want realism, then you can't ever put shoes on Spider-Man. It's like, is this like, I think the thing to me with Spider-Man, as long as he has thin, like you said, ninja type shoes instead of thick soled things, then I can believe that, you know, and it's, maybe I'm making an argument against myself with the Thundercat stuff, but everyone has their own threshold of like what is, oh, it's just fantasy, so whatever works. And then like this is what makes it work for me. It makes me believe it. It makes it that much more possible, like as being a real thing, if that makes sense. So like to me, like even changing the harness and giving it that segment, that to me made it feel like, oh, it's war, it's like light armor, he has a little bit of protection, like otherwise why would he have the spikes on him, right? You know, he's not like just a leather daddy or something, right? You know, it's like it's there for a reason. So like to me, to make that more believable, it's, you know, I just try to make it feel more segmented, and instead of it just making like, oh, it's a one giant strap with all these spikes, it's like got these layers. And you know, I think it's just like what I know there's other examples I could eventually think of, but like what makes the fantasy believable for you, and then what makes it just like anything goes, right? You have to have your own like set of rules and logics that would make it acceptable. Because as soon as you forget one of the, that's what I try to do with this. You know, I was talking with we talk about this, or I don't want to keep yammering on in like one long thought, but like what makes it believable to you, and that's coming with like a set of things. Like when I was working on the Trap Jaw maquette for Tweeterhead, I was talking with Gio Nakpil, the guy who also did Panthro, who's amazing. So Trapjaw was the first statue release that Gio worked on, but the first one he actually worked on was Panthro. But we were talking about like how would mechanics work in this world of He-Man, right? And to me, it's like I don't want exposed wires. I did that in 2000X. It's cool, and I think like I came up with the rules like no exposed wires. Like to me, and wires you could chop back and it would screw things up, even if they're thick. I just no wires. But then like how do we get the mechanics of Trapjaw's arm to work? And I kept thinking, like, how do I make this believable and how do I make it look evil, cool, and whatever? And so I was referencing what Weta did with Lord of the Rings, the orcs, just thinking, like, what if orcs could continue to evolve and then have technology? Like, what would that look like? It's like steampunk orky kind of stuff. So you could see, like, sections that could, like, move over each other and chains and stuff. So, like, it feels like it moves around, right? And that was, like, a set of rules I came up with for Trapjaw. So with, like, Panthro, I was like, you know, looking at what we did at Sideshow and the feedback on all the pieces, because we did a few. It was like, all right, cool. I got to bring it a little bit back closer to classic. And these are the areas I think it makes sense. And then these are the things I'm going to keep the same because I think it makes sense. And here are things I'm going to push a little bit more because it's always, every piece is a little bit different. But having worked on that stuff back then, having that long time to get to Panthro and then the period of waiting really gave me time to make sure, like, once I decide it's this much kind of fur texture on them, it's like you got to do it on all of them because otherwise it's like, all right, he's furry, the other ones aren't. All right, this guy has some of this guy doesn't, you know, and it's just like you just got to make some of these choices, make sure you're willing to like commit. So you get that consistency, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it
Sorry
makes
if that was like a
sense.
long thought to get there, but yeah.
No, but it's good. It's good to hear the thought process behind, the creation. So David, he's saying, appreciate you and what you do for the art, but please don't drop the ball on Lion-O. Says the sideshow version was horrible with that ballerina outfit. I don't know. I don't know what he means by
Dude,
ballerina.
all right. So I understand. I still love that piece, and I get why. So we made the shorts longer because to me it's like, all right, I think we thought of like biker, like a legit like athletic shorts, like how like long they could go to cover them up, just make it look modern. So we made instead of making him like a bathing suit line, we just made them a little bit longer, just trying to think like, hey, if we could modernize this a little bit more, what would we do? And it's just I don't know where he's getting ballerina outfit out of it. When I think of ballerina, I think of like a tutu.
Yeah.
But yeah, we gave him like longer athletic shorts, and people did not like that. So I hope people can see on Panthro, we did not give him shorts. So we went back, and we listen. I still think the longer thing makes sense, but at the same time, like I get like at the end of the day, you're asking people to spend $500 to $600 on these things. So make sure it finds that right balance of push and what's not pushed. So yeah.
I feel like, David, have you seen the new comics by Dynamite Comics?
I haven't actually. That's been on my list. It's like there's so much of everything. It's like I need to check it out though. I've seen a lot of the art like posts on Instagram and stuff. I haven't actually like read the comics or anything yet.
I spoke to Drew Moss last week. He's the penciler, the illustrator for the book, and it's interesting because they've taken some real huge leaps in terms of creative liberties with the redesigns on the characters for those comics. The cats have pants now, so forget about underwear. They have full on kind of baggy cargo pants, and Tigra has like this kind of lamb chop mustache thing where the mustache connects with the lamb chops. And Drew was telling me it makes sense because Tigra is like the wise, so he should show a sense of being more elderly. So I wouldn't say I would have gone with that choice of facial hair, but it makes sense to portray the age and the wisdom, I guess. But it's things to think about. That comic is selling like crazy, dude. They're going on a third printing of issue 1. Issue 2 just dropped out in stores yesterday. So when you think about redesigning and all that kind of stuff, Dynamite has done like extensive changes to the looks.
So I get that. Here's the biggest difference, right? And I've experienced this my 10 years at Sideshow because we were redesigning a lot of characters. Some did great, like Thanos on Throne was one of the best-selling pieces at Sideshow for a long time, and that was a complete redesign of them. And then certain characters didn't sell well, and they hated if Dave Igo removed the underwear on top of the pants. I was known for doing that. I hate superheroes with red underwear on top of blue pants. And I can at least say confidently, I've cosplayed and I've done real underwear, then pants, tights, and then different colored underwear on top of that. And it sucks. It sucks. It makes everything a mess. It is not like, and people are like, but look at old boxers did pants and this. I'm like, dude, like you go out there. All right, if you want to wear no underwear underneath, you want to just go right to pants and then underwear on top of it. It's so stupid. It doesn't make any sense to me. I have but that's like a nerdy thing. It's like, but then the biggest thing is someone will complain about me removing the underwear on this or me removing the S on Superman's cape from here. And then you see people like, if they do it in a movie or comic or a video game, it's okay because the price of admission to accept that is like $5 for a comic, $50 for a game and $20 for a movie. You know what I mean? Versus like, here's this thing you haven't seen before, and the price of admission to appreciate is $500. And they go, not my thing. Like statues have a weird threshold of it has to be based on something that already exists and look like that because now I'm celebrating it here. It's rare, and not saying it's impossible because we've done it a lot with a lot of things, to say here's this thing you haven't seen before as a statue, and then people appreciate it. And I think that comes with time and acceptance and seeing it in other places. Like, I'm hoping what we've done with Motu really helps show like what we're doing with Thundercats. We're like, like I think what we've been doing, there's a long history of that. And if we can keep going with Thundercats, there'll be a history of that too. And consistency helps. And people want to jump in knowing like, if I spend $550 on this Panthro, is there going to be a Lion-O or a Chitara or a Tiger after this? Or am I just like spending all this money on this one weird version of this character, So comics are very different, very forgiving. Because again, 3 to 5 to 8, I forget how much a comic costs now. It's very different. And you get a whole story, all the characters. Versus like, here's the one thing, so.
It makes sense what you're saying because it's the price of admission. Again, I guess people that are going to spend, big bucks, they want something that's their version of what they think is the ultimate look of the character. I personally think Panthro looks amazing. I saw it in person at PowerCon, and we'll definitely get into more images of that. But I did want to say, we got Damian Ristori says, hey, everyone, one Thundercat character I'd like in statue form is Inflamer. He could look so epic. You remember Inflamer, David?
I'm Googling him right now because I have no idea.
I want to say he was the guy that was they had to feed him gold, and then he basically created like a volcano. And
he was like the giant like lava monster of sorts, but he was okay. Like he was, I'm a good guy. Then you fed him more and more, then he became a bad guy. Yeah. Was it that guy?
Yeah,
I remember that episode. That's crazy. I was Googling it. Google wasn't giving me anything for some dumb reason, but that would be insane. It'd be just so risky because I think like you have to sell X amount of these things. That guy is so big, it would cost this much. And are there, 300 people out there in the world that want to spend $800 on this thing? Maybe, it's just, it gets hard to like look at that stuff. Like,
what I've noticed with Thundercats when it comes to high end, because obviously with Super 7, they're doing deep cuts, they're going all over the place, right? Yeah. But with high end, you never seem to get past the core main guys and Mumra. I would love to see the mutants represented. I mean, I'll take it back. Iron Studios has done a kick-ass job on their 110 scale statues. They've pretty much done all the mutants and everything, but that's like a different scale. That's not Epic's scale. That's
they're small. They're 110.
Yeah, super detailed. I own a bunch of them, but one thing for sure, after seeing the Beastman that you guys made, dude, I can only imagine how awesome a Monkian would be, bro. Like,
Monkian would be great. I think I would go for Slythe first for obvious reasons, and I think making him a giant lizard ball, like with cool creaturey stuff, channel a lot like the Rankin Bass Hobbit stuff, and Lord of the Rings. Like that's where when people talk about like wanting Thundercats to be, this is on statue form and on the Facebook post that Tweeterhead made. Some people are like, oh, I wish he was a little more grittier and worn, battle worn. I'm like, dude, I think that's more of like the evil mutants, like is the grittier, more detailed like stuff going on. But like Thundercats, the good guys to me are like more superhero Olympic team clean approach. And then, the bad guys are the grittier, like, whatever. Like when they talk about comparing the Thundercats to the He-Man stuff we're doing, I'm like, dude, He-Man is sci-fi fantasy gladiators to me, right? And the Thundercats are not that. We're calling both lines legends because it's like, how do we, make this, like you said, look for a motion picture or whatever? And to me, it doesn't mean everything looks the same, but I would love to get into the evil or into the mutants. I almost call them evil. Are they? They're just called the mutants, right? Evil mutants. I'm getting that mixed up, like evil warriors of He-Man and mutants of Thundercats, right? Yeah, I love like Slythe is my top guy though. I would love to do him. Dude, Monkian would be great. Jack, is it Jackalman? Am I butchering this? All right.
Jackalman. Ultraman. But there's other characters that I would absolutely love to see your take on. For example, Hachiman, the Lunatax, for example.
Lunatax would be awesome. Yeah, I love that's some of my favorite Thundercats history. Like remembering those episodes, it's like key for me. But yeah, I mean, again, like that seems more like Iron Studios 110 scale to be able to go like wide with that. Like with us, it's like, hey, if Panthro does good, then we'll hopefully get one more statue this year. Then if that one does good, next year we'll get 2, maybe 3. You know, and like you said, we want to hit the core team members. You know, and the team, you have the main cats, then you have Snarf, then you got the what do you call it? Like Pumaira and Linkso and those guys. I forget what's that called? Like the second wave.
They're kind of like the ancillary heroes because they come in later on in the season.
I love them. Yeah, they're like awesome. So it's like getting those guys. Then you have Mumra. I want to do Mummify. I want to do like pre-transformation Mumra, which we teased at PowerCon, and then eventually. Then do some more of the mutants. Then I want to do a full transformation Mumra again one day down the line. Because I think people that missed out on the first one that Satcha did is awesome. And it's been been sold out for a long time. So eventually doing one of those would be great. And it's just hard to think of like how many years is that to get like all those characters done before. Because I would hate to not complete the Thundercats heroes, not complete the mutants, and then have another character kind of like come in there. And then for some reason we can't continue. Then it's like you said, then someone's stuck without a complete team, So you just it's a careful balance
tricky
all that.
Because it's it's definitely tricky because it's a much more costly line.
Yep.
So you gotta kind of keep that balance.
Like imagine how many those are how much space all that would take up. It's crazy, I can
totally see it. But we have a couple other comments here. So David Banner says, can we get the Silverhawks next? I'm definitely going to do
that one. Is even a bigger problem licensing wise. It's just hard. We've been trying because we, Chad and I want to do, and to me that's where to even go further. Like if Heroic Warriors and He-Man were like gladiators, and then the Thundercats are like superhero Olympians, then like to me Silverhawks would be like future tech sleek. Like I can imagine some people like, oh, you got a segmented armor, but then it's like then they lose all their cool aerodynamic feel. I would have a very specific approach to doing that right, and I think it'd be awesome. I actually did a fan sculpt of Monstar, little like I forgot if I posted or not, but that's something I can show you guys too. But sometimes I do that before we start a character, depending on the character. I didn't do it for Panthro because I knew Geo would just kill it. But I might do it for Slythe. But I did it with a few He-Man characters where I'll go into ZBrush and do a little like maquette of like how would I, Dave Igo, interpret this character now for like if I could have my own line, which is like Legends essentially. What would I do with it? Monstar was one I had fun with because I try to combine his pre-transformation and then the armor of his transformation, because I think with like Mumra, he goes from this decrepit guy into this like cool, when he transforms, he becomes cooler. In ways, I prefer Monstar pre-transformation than post-transformation because I feel like his design just looks kind of hokey. It's like, oh, okay, he's bigger, but I think pre-transformation of him looks awesome. So I was trying to make it like, how do you make Monstar look cool, like as is? And then so that's the sculpt I'm working on, is like the full hair, but I'm giving him like some of the armor elements. And then how would I make him look like what would be his transformation? That's something I think would be a fun challenge to try and make it take the look from the cartoon.
I love that concept because I personally have the Monstar from Super 7, and I prefer the pre-transformation. I just think he looks more metal and he looks more sinister. The other one just kind of looks like a metal golem. It doesn't have
It's cool. It's cool, but doesn't read like ultimate. It feels more like a big, like a muscle man to the leader, right? It's hard to like put your finger on. This is where like design and art gets completely like subjective. But when I look at that, even as a kid, it wasn't like, oh, that's the coolest bad guy. It was always like pre-transformation Monstar was the coolest bad guy to me in that show. And then it was pre-transformation. Then is it Buzzsaw? Is the guy, right? Buzzsaw? Yeah, Buzzsaw. I love. I'm sorry, we're mixing like so many things. I'm like, oh, am I keeping track of all this right? Buzzsaw was my second favorite. And then it's like a few other characters. Then it's transformation, like Monstar. You know, he was like further down the line than like some of the other ones. But I love. Sorry, that felt like a long answer, but I love Silver. I love that whole. I know like Thundercats and Silverhawks is like loosely canon to each other. You know, and in the
Kind of like the same
2011
universe,
show,
yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah,
in the
like a ranking
2011
mass.
Thundercat show, we got hints of them in that world, which is great. But I would, if I could do a dumb dream project of mine would be to do Monstar and his like space squid guy. Just like, how would you make that thing work? And like, I forget if he
That
had
would
a
be
weapon
bad.
when he rode him or not. It's been so long since I've seen that, but I'd love to give him like some long ass, cool looking javelin spike thing that just like, so when he's on this thing, it's like, or just like a lot, like what would be the weapon he would use on that thing? You know, I just love it. So and I
That
love
would be
squids
so
and octopus,
rad.
like a giant nautilus thing.
I
You know, that'd
love
be
that idea. That's sick. I love that. I would love to
yeah,
see
that's
something
what I
like
would.
that. Attack Peter
Yeah.
says Dave Igo is the man. What's up, Attack Peter?
Peter's awesome. I love that dude. Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot when we first met. It was like a convention of like 4 or 5 years ago. Well before he was at Mondo. And I mean, I think it was actually when I was working at Sideshow. I think it was at Gracie, who's head of the print program, and I were at. I forgot if it was Designer Con or another convention, but we saw his work, and Gracie was like, "Oh, we gotta get him on the print program." Then that's when I met him, and yeah, he's amazing. He's got a great eye, great aesthetic, unique aesthetic. And then yeah, he took my ZBrush class like last year with a few other friends. So that was cool. Like he's hopefully still jamming in ZBrush because that's such a fun program to use. You can just like,
Oh, dude, I just got a new 21-inch tablet, and I'm doing my stuff with ZBrush, man. I'm
cool.
having a lot of fun. So
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
definitely an awesome program, you know, to create things that, you know, because you could create things in 2D, but to actually be able to physically translate them in 3D and eventually print them and everything is just, it's amazing.
Yeah, I had a good buddy of mine who was I knew when I first moved out here 18 years ago. My first job was at Gentle Giant Studios. Another like they had like different pillars of the company. One pillar was they made statues similar to like Sideshow and Tweeterhead, like small Star Wars busts and stuff like that. Then they had like 3D scanning and a service wing of the company. And this guy Joe Jung was on the LTD side, who made statues and stuff. And he was traditional, like rough it out in clay, get to a point, junk mold it, go to wax, and finish everything. And he's crazy good. And like years ago, I was trying to get him to learn ZBrush, and he was kind of like one of those guys that's like, I'm a traditional artist. You know, I'm like, oh, dude, like not saying you have to quit that, but like learning digital is just like another way to expand your horizon. And now he's using digital, which is great. But I remember
it's the future, man.
For a while, huh?
It's the future.
It is. It's just like, why limit yourself? You know, be like, nope, I only want to do it this way. It's like, well, a lot of jobs are like can be that way, but a lot of jobs are over here and a lot of jobs are over here, and some jobs you have to mix the two. And I remember just like when we were when he was learning, taking the class with me the first time, him and another buddy, Butch Hewitt, who passed away a few years ago, but he was also a Gentle Giant sculptor. Butch was the hardest guy to convince of anything. I'd be teaching a thing like, and here's how you do it. He's like, oh, I can do that traditionally. It's like, I'm not saying you can't do it traditionally, but like literally you can shrink a head, make it bigger, make it smaller again, like that. He's like, well, I can do that with this molding process. I'm like, no, literally, I can do it like, oh, wait, I have this finished sculpt. Let me try the head small. Nope, don't like, oh, wait, hon, let me, all right, wait, hon. All right, cool. And to do that traditional, it's like, dude, crazy, you know, like just to like, and this gets into a whole nother talk about like artists and what kind of artist you are. I'm a guy that doesn't see it 100% in my head before I execute it. It's like I have a rough idea, then I figure it out as I go. And that's between rough design and in sculpt. And, you know, I don't work great with every sculptor ever because some sculptors want an exact blueprint, every drawing, every view, exact measurements, all stuff so they can, you know, do it that way. And that's fine. But I've always worked better with people like Gio, who worked on Panthro, who like want something loose that then they can kind of own on their own, and you know, a director that gives them feedback. And yeah, sometimes Gio and I had some extra back and forth, but he knows I'm really empathetic whenever I go, Gio, I'm so sorry, I totally missed this, we try it this way. Or I can take the file, try it out my way before I make him suffer through it, you know? And right. Yeah, just digital and ZBrush has just really opened up so many doors for so many artists across the world to be in the industry. and just provided opportunities like me working with Geo where we can pass a file back and forth and collaborate on it versus like, send me photos. Let me do this. All right. Well, I can't really tell, like, dude, your depth of field from or you're like taking the photo this close. It's all distorted. It's like, just send me the file. And it's so easy to like work with each other that way. And, you know, more and more people jump and learning digital and they love it. And some people use it with traditional still together. And some people love it so much. It's like, they don't go back to traditional because it's like easy to do on a laptop. You can do it on the go. It's less material, less mess. And again, some people will just like use it to previs an idea and then they turn and then they sculpt that idea. Instead of trying to like figure it out here, they figure it out on their computer, then they can turn and do it. And it's awesome. I love any way anyone wants to use it. Just whenever anyone poo-poos it, it's like, dude, you're just being closed-minded. You know, it's like, all right, fine. Choose not to have fun and choose not to have more work opportunities, you know? So
That's true. That's true. I totally agree. So you got some images to show us of the Panthro?
Oh, Panthro, yeah. What were you talking about again? We're talking about art and stuff, right? Yeah, and Jorge, as I'm going along, like, don't hesitate to, like, if you see questions or any like, I want to treat it like if I was there in person with you. If you have questions, if someone else is like, oh, that's like, you can interrupt me. Just let me like maybe finish a sentence and then, you know, let me know if there's a question or anything. But yeah, how do I share?
All right, so.
Or you just make me share? Do you force it on me?
You should be able to go into. Do you have an option where it says
present? Oh, present. There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
Share screen. Share screen. Entire screen. Entire screen. That screen. There you go.
All right.
Can you see?
Yep.
That's my desktop of a bunch of crazy stuff. Actually, before I forget, you want me to show you that Mumroth or Monstar thing real quick?
Yeah.
Before I forget,
sure.
So I do a lot of like fan art stuff in ZBrush, but this is my actually just for context is like, since you were talking about Beastman earlier, this is like the rough ZBrush maquette I did.
Oh, that's
just kind of like get an idea going. I posted this on my Instagram at David Igo stuff in case people want to see. I posted a few others to post like a Trap Jaw Merman. I posted like a Buzz Off in case we ever do Buzz Off. Nice. But yeah, these things are rough. Like they from a distance they look clean, but when you zoom in, you can kind of see like there's a lot of stuff like not really worked out. But the idea with me doing these things is try to figure out like what's the main attitude I want to go for, the main level of like push classic, bring in a little 2000X, bring in this, bring in that, or whatever, and try and sell an idea. And then let another artist, like in this case, Geo Nakbill also worked on Beastman. Let him come in and like take that and plus it up a bit more too. So that's kind of like just thanks, man. So that's just like some context for why I do these busts, and they're fun. I'm a nerd, you know. So where did I put it? Did I call him Monstar or did I call him Silverhawks? That's what he is. Dory. I'm an idiot. Monstar. Here we go. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So this is me taking. Thanks, man. So this is like taking his classic black suit kind of a thing, which I think he has a couple spikes. But then I brought in some of the armor elements into it too. And this is heavily inspired by Gary Oldman's Dracula armor and the Bram Stoker's Dracula from the 90s. And I hate, off the top of my head, I can't think of the costume designer. I'm going to throw myself off a building, but it's a female costume designer. She's amazing. I think a lot of people should know that reference of like the red armor that Gary Oldman wears. And that's why I want to bring into that. And then I love his hair. That was like I just want to get that volume of like this crazy big floof. I wanted it to look like his armor looks aggressive and it looks like it could work for his aesthetic. And then like, what would a transformation after that kind of be? I was actually channeling a lot of Michael Shannon. I think would be an amazing. Is that his name? The guy who played Zod in the Man of Steel movie? That's Michael Shannon.
Michael Shannon. Yeah.
Dude, imagine Michael Shannon showing up as Monstar. And I don't know if you ever saw the movie Bullet Train, but Michael Shannon and Bullet Train's like freaking awesome. So it's like, anyways, this is like a little design maquette I did for what I would do if I could do Monstar, and like the eye patch I don't know if you can tell. I think I took an image of it. But I was trying to think like how even to do the eye patch strap. Yeah, there we go. A little bit differently. So it's like you can see it's like a crater crossing, get that star pattern. Like the tips hold in the glass, and then the straps are like crab legs in a way, like they're just gripping into his flesh. It's not fully fleshed out, but I thought that'd be kind of a cooler thing instead of it just being a standard eye patch with a star on it and straps. So I try to like make it have a little bit more of a cool alien feeling, but when you zoom out, you know, like when you actually see the thing, it still looks like his classic eye patch, you know. So
that's really sick, man. That looks awesome.
Thanks, man. So that if I could do it, that'd be how I would approach him, in like similar to what we did with Panthro. And I know it might be polarizing because it's like, hey, that's not what he looks like in the cartoon or something, but it's like, this makes sense to me. So I'd probably paint his armor really dark red, so it's almost black. You know what I mean? So you get that classic like pre-transformation feel, but then you get that like extra layer of like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, so this is the gallery for actually let me just do it this way. The full gallery for Panthro that just went up for sale today. And you know, we shared some of the images on social. We shared 10 of them today, and then another like a couple over other posts and stuff. This is just kind of go through like the full gallery on the website. So we always do a balance of like theatrical shots, and I work with the photographer on this to kind of get the balance of like heroic, warm feeling. We looked at the intro, looked at some other art from Thundercats, try and capture that feel. And I think low angle shots always feel more like badass and epic. So we go for that. Then you need, you know, less dramatic camera angles so people can tell what it is. And then here's the open light full turn of this guy. We try to go for obviously a cool ninja pose with the nunchucks. So there's actually going to be a source chain in production. And the pose was one we went back and forth on a lot. Tweak the legs, tweak this just to get things right. So, you know, we got his upper arm silver band. We got his lower cuff there. And then you can see the segmented parts of his spikes. And then the spikes are where we actually added a little bit of like grit to the paint, just a little bit. Because I just felt if we did that overall, it'd just make him look messy. Again, like I think the Olympic superhero team is a sound, you know, like comparison for what we want to go for. And then you can start, I'll show this later in a work in progress shot. You can see like the nunchucks, we added this silver trim to it to kind of like channel a little bit more of like what the Thunder Tank feel. I thought it'd be kind of cool to channel into the nunchuck. So there's like a design aesthetic to Cat's Lair, the Thunder Tank, and then it carries over to the nunchucks as well.
That's cool.
You see a bit of the texturing on that, and then the segmentation, the scalloping on that, and some of the details on the face, and a little bit of like the hair. Like we want to go really subtle, but make sure it was, you know, there. And then you get some close-ups of the nunchuck and that. Another good angle of the nunchuck and detail. The belt. So I'm going to show an image how we're approaching this. This is basically a cast clear element that was painted red, and then the black was painted on the inside. It was like a sculpted indent on the inside. Because if you did this with like just a decal, I think it would work good for toys, but I think for a high-end statue, it would look a little janky.
Yeah.
And so you can actually see we actually have a little bit of texture on everything. So I don't like anything perfectly smooth unless it's supposed to be like an odd, like I don't know, like things are perfectly smooth for a reason, but I think like this little subtle texture is like all that it needs to feel like fabric. You don't need like a mesh. I feel like any sort of heavy mesh looking thing would just take away. It's just like we already have fur, and then if we had like a mesh texture on his belt or his, you know, underwear, it would just be too much. So, and then the base, so this is a departure a little bit from what we did previously at Sideshow, but Sideshow, like the Cat's Lair tech on there was a little bit like we're at the time I was thinking like, oh, grittier, you know, whatever, exactly what people wanted. But then I'm like, just looking at it was like a gunmetal-y look. It just didn't feel Thundercats to me. So Chad and I decided like on this one, let's make it a little bit more closer to the source material and make it I think it has a warmer feel too. We actually talked about doing a paint variant where the base would be more gunmetal, but I'm like, that's just too much, you know, paint variant's the base. But Yeah, you can see like, and then we really looked at a ton of different artwork because there's tons of different color variation on the rocks and the mountains and the dirt right around Cat's Lair. So this is like our blend of them all, essentially. And then we get some more theatrical shots kind of showing off the piece. So that's him. And I brought some more stuff to kind of take you through the journey. So starting out with like a ton of reference, you know, just like looking at stuff from the cartoon when we were talking about doing a swap out nunchuck with maybe a fire blast coming out of it, but it didn't work with the pose. I'm like, let's not do that. And, you know, reference for the nunchucks, we're talking about maybe doing a holder for them. And it would just be too much. I think that stuff makes sense for like toys and smaller scale stuff. When it comes to big stuff, I just didn't know if that would make having like a 1/5 scale nunchuck display would make sense, you know. But yeah, we look at like what other companies have done in the past, and you know, just looking at like what parts it came with. We talked about maybe doing a sculpted thing, but the pose worked so good to do any sort of swap out pose stuff would just be way too intensive. And I feel like when you do too many swap out parts on a statue that give you different pose options, one or two of them, like they're gonna look awkward unless they're very subtle. You know what I mean? Because as soon as you start moving a whole arm at the shoulder, your whole torso changes, right? So I try to avoid that stuff. Looking at stuff that they did in the 2011 show too, just to, you know, not that I was like considering doing baggy pants or whatever, just be like, hey, is there a way we can maybe do a swap out arm? We talked about this, a whole swap out arm that had a little more of a mechanical armoring or something to pay homage to this show, but then it would be complicated with the nunchucks and making those swap and all that stuff. So, and then we talked about maybe doing light up eyes, but then that would require a head swap or engineering for wiring. And then that's a whole production issue. And then certain countries have weird regulations about shipping things with electronics. We're just like, let's just avoid it. Let's just not make our lives harder, you know, just do the one version we can, make it the best we can. And then, as you know, there's totally different, like subtle color variations from like the toy colors, the cartoon colors, right, to promo artwork. So we just looked at everything when we were working on paint too, just make sure we got like the right balance of Panthro. So a bunch of screen grabs I took of the intro, bunch of different, you know, so look at the original toy, you know, just like get that color reference, some cool imagery of the 2011 show, old art. Love, like, this is kind of stuff that, you know, where people take liberties. This is a custom action figure where they're trying to make. Yeah, I was just waiting for you to be like, that's mine. I actually made that or something. I don't know if you've seen that before, but yeah, it's a fun little.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So I always start every project with just like deep diving tons of reference and looking at the team lineup. You know, like I get this like the original lineup. I just never bought the idea that and I think they changed it later that Panthro would ever be shorter than Tyke, right? To me, he's the big diesel guy, you know. So like it's fun looking at this stuff and how tiny old man Mumra is here. It's like it's crazy. It's like then looking at, you know, how other people have done it, the lineup for this cartoon show, which this is more how I feel it would go. Like this is a bit extreme for like a classic feeling stuff. I love it when Slight's like a bigger creature. I like when Transform Mumra is like, this is too giant. Like if we made a new one now, I would make him that giant. But it's fun seeing like how pushed it can get for other things. So always look at the reference. And this is kind of like a journey of different work in progress stuff. Like this is so Geo always starts out with a neutral pose, and we look at that, and he's like, "Hey, here's just a super rough first pass based on like everything we talked about." So you can see the beginning of like the scalloping of the armor, the belt. Like this is still a little bit like I asked him at first to try shorter shorts, you know, before we went back to full bathing suits. So you can see like that was the beginning of the transition, and then this was him just kind of slapping on some colors to see what it looked like, and this is me doing some Photoshop to like beef him up a little bit. And this is before I made the shorts edits. And this is like one of his earlier passes at the pose. There's another pose we were looking at too, but this is the one we went with. And this is his first pass, which is great. It's missing a little bit of energy from certain angles, but that's what part of, you know, this process is you start somewhere, right? So this is like just a show very early on, like where we start out, rough block out, you know, get all the elements on there. And just make sure you're kind of getting what you want. You can even see like here, his chest is more erect. And in the final, it went a little bit more hunched because it works better with the pose that way. You can see it starts to go that way in this update. you can see there's no foot guard here. So, because I was pretty adamant on keeping his feet exposed, but we eventually go in and add in the foot guard. This is a rough refinement of the costume. So again, you can still see how like rough some stuff is. And I think people, this is a lesson for anyone trying to get into ZBrush. Some people go to clean separate items right away and dividing or whatever. This is all like, I think this whole strap besides the spikes is like one Dynamesh. These aren't like all separate parts yet. This is Geo like sculpt in. You just use damn center, scribe that in, scribe that in, scribe that in. I think this is like 5 subtools, not including the spikes. You know, it's like harness, body. I think he sculpted the belt out, but like this stuff isn't all separate. This, I think that might be separate. The boots still might be part of the legs, but you can see how rough everything is, just to like help give you an idea. On this, you can see the short shorts became, this is where we made the transition to underwear.
Right.
And then we look at, you know, once we start refining the anatomy, you can see the anatomy is getting refined. We throw on the costume elements. We look at the whole thing. And this is a great thing about digital. Oh, and this is the first pass at the foot guard going on there too. This is where we start to look at like the proportions of everything together. And with digital, you can easily kind of like, hey, the legs feel like, it looks like his upper body's pretty heavy and he has little tiny legs. We just did some real subtle stretching to all that stuff down there. So with digital, you have that ability. You know what I mean? You're not like, a lot of people think like you're not supposed to design and sculpt, but you know, if you can choose to just like say this is bolted in 100% done and make it exactly like that. Or as you work, you can choose to be critical and go, no, we can make this a little bit better. And always, my boss Chad is always awesome about giving us that extra little time to do that. You know, it's not like we're a business. We have to make sure we're hitting deadlines and stuff. But at the end of the day, we're asking someone to pay, you know, $500 to $600 for these things. They're not going to care how fast it gets on the website. They're going to care when it's on the website, how awesome does it look? And then what price is it, right? You know, right. So we just want to make sure we're not leaving anything on the table that we regret. And this is when Gio started to separate the separate parts of the armor and start to refine, like, and this is where he made these like actual segmented claws. I'm like, that's a little too much. You know, like, let's just keep this like a cool little like diamond shape or something like that. But this is a first pass on the base. You could see like a lot of this stuff is just like colliding through. A lot of it, like, is just, hey, here's some rocks. Let me design out this thing and just slap them together. And then we took that and we refined it so we didn't have like weird clipping and stuff like that. But they can see the refinement of the anatomy. And then he's bringing in the more finished armor. So Gio jumps between a few different programs. He works for a company called, well, I think we all know Adobe, but they have Adobe Medium. So that's a VR sculpting. He works in that. He works in ZBrush, and he also, I think at one point was working in Maya to build these hard surface parts in neutral, but now he's doing that a lot in Adobe Medium. So he jumps between a few programs to get the results he wants. And here's the nunchucks. I think these are the final ones, just to show kind of like the final little accents and details and all these little subtle forms he gets in there. Gio's just like one of the best. He's great at anatomy. He's great with creatures. He's great with hard surface. It's usually someone's good at creatures, anatomy, and soft stuff. Like, I think I'm pretty good at that stuff. I'm horrible with hard surface stuff, but Gio's great at like everything. So yeah, it's the nunchuck design. And this is like a first pass of the fur. Like, we tried one of those a little more subtle. So he's like, hey, look at the shoulder, look at the upper arm. You know, I tried a couple things out. Let me know if like this feels too heavy, this feels too soft. I think we actually literally split the difference between this and this to get the final look. And he tried some on the face. And again, what happens or not again, we haven't talked about this yet really, but sometimes you push things a little bit more in ZBrush, and then when you 3D print it and it goes in mold and cast, things soften up a little bit. And I'm like super okay with that with this kind of stuff, because I think having it be slightly on the lighter side in fur would feel more classic rather than going too heavy and it feels like thick fur or something. Right. So yeah, and I think this is like the final fur detail. Again, it won't show up like this probably on the final sculpt people get, but this is just to show like, you know, a little bit more push. And then when it gets printed and mold and cast, will soften up a little bit, but you can see like where it started. So it's a bit of a journey. And then here's the final sculpt, you know, some renders. We can open these up this way so we can zoom in a bit. It's got some nice rendering, but you see like the fur, the feet, the base. So there's nothing on the logo because it's a clean disc. Like the logo's on the inside of it. We can see all the anatomy. Gio's just like one of the best when it comes to anatomy. And this hand holding this nunchuck is awesome. You get really good tension in here. He's just super good. I love that dude. Love you, Gio. Shout out.
The pose really shows the power of this guy. You know what I mean?
We were trying to channel like what would Bruce Lee do, you know, like, which sounds like blasphemous, but you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, like we want it to feel like a genuine like martial arts pose, but then make it feel like he's grounded, balanced, and you know, ready to just like kick ass at the same time. You know, it's not dynamic. He's not jumping off the front of the base or off to the side or anything like that. He's like centered and ready to defend, you know. Can you hear my dog?
Yeah. Slightly, I heard him now.
I'm thinking if I should open the door and tell her to shut up. No, she chilled out. Yeah, you can see how like the these things got, you know, instead of them being like those literal claws, we simplified this. I think this just reads a little bit more elegant. And then you get close-ups of the feet. Look how cool that looks. Come on. You want to cover that? Shut up. And then yeah, and then some production stuff we're working on. So this is stuff I do to show the factory so we get quoting. So I do a size test, and this is about how high he is total, the width and the depth, just so the factory can get an idea of like how big this thing is. And then also then we have that information when we tell people are going to buy it. Like this is roughly the dimensions because it might shrink a little bit in production, but I'd rather give people a little bit too big of a dimension. They measure out their space and like, oh, cool, that'll fit. If you make it slightly too big, then they like, oh, but I planned for this. But, you know, so we do this for both information for the website and for the factory. And then I show them a parts blowout. This isn't how the collector is going to get it, but just so the factory knows like, oh, these are the parts we're going to give you that. Oh, why isn't this getting bigger? But you see like the head's a piece. It's actually going to be seamed in the final. Like I don't want people to worry about like a seam on him, but we just had to do it because of the ears. So in the fact, like when the collector gets it, like a lot of this is going to be assembled. It's not going to be like, oh, here's a kit, right? But this is what we did to give to the factory for 3D printing. You can see the logo sculpted right there, and then there's a negative instead of it on the back side of that. The base is one giant freaking thing. We have one leg peg for the foot to go into. The customer might, like the factory, then might give them 2 foot pegs to put them in. We're not totally sure yet. Then you have the nunchucks, you have the ends. The chain will be sourced, so that's not on here. And then you see all the spikes that go around each harness piece. So just a little bit, you know, factories want to know what they're getting into production-wise. So that shows them that.
Right.
And then we show like the chain, like how that's going to connect. And we actually sculpted in a little like area for the chain to rest in. So that way it's not like sliding along, ruining paint. It's like, oh, when you assemble it, it'll fit right in this little area. And then to show how we want to execute this thing, this is like the inside of this guy and how that would key onto it. So basically I have a positive of it here and a negative of it here to get that jewel effect. So
nice.
Yeah. And then so this is fun. Just what we talked about. This is the announcement asset we used in July 2020. So it's like we put that up, and every couple months people are like, when's it coming? When's it coming? When's it coming? We're like, oh. So this is a fun little, like in a few months it'll be our 4-year anniversary from when we announced it. So
wow,
that was fun. And then I got approval from Chad to show you guys. This is an original. Like you guys haven't. This hasn't been shown to anyone yet. We've teased Lino and Tiger, but we haven't really shown how we're playing the rest of the line. Not saying this is set in stone. Things can always change. Things can always evolve. But when Gio and I were first working on this together, we were like, we had a rough pose for Panthro, but then we're like, Gio just quickly put together some poses for some of the other characters based on some rough concept art. So this is just a teaser for what the whole line could look like for the heroes right now. So you get a teaser. And again, just these could change, you know, approvals, anything like that. But I'm pretty confident we're going to get something plus or minus like this. So we're going to get Chitara in an actual full-on sprint running pose, Tiger like Lino sword up, like summoning the team kind of a pose. I just want to capture that, and it's gonna be a tall piece, but make room. It's like this is Lino, baby. And then Tigra, I really was, I wanted this set to feel like you hear the intro theme. You know what I mean? I want like when you see Tigra jumping on screen and using his whip and disappearing and then showing back up in the Thunder Tank. We want to channel that in his pose. Chitara when she's running through all the mutants and stuff. We want to channel that pose. And then Wily Cat. We're not totally sure this is the one we're still toying with. They might both come together as one statue riding on one board, kind of like a really playful, fun thing, or they might be two pieces. We're not totally sure yet. So that's the biggest asterisk. Like maybe maybe it will be that, maybe it won't.
Is that a little tail in the back? Is that Snarf?
No, that's a little smoke trail, I think, from this or something.
Okay.
Good eye. Snarf, yeah, he'll be on a proximity piece. We haven't figured out what we're gonna do with him yet. This is just the core cat team. I know Snarf is part of that, but yeah, minus Snarf. And then
I love that Lionel pose, man. That looks cool.
So then what I showed you earlier in the reference, kind of like how there's the different, like, oh, this is how they scaled the team. This is how the original concept scaled the team. This is how 2011 scaled the team. So we did, Gio before we did these poses, he did a real rough pass at like what the team could look like proportionately. And again, these are all first pass, super rough. This is after actually, I think we bulked up Panthro, but like Chitara might change a little bit, but I think it gives a pretty good indication of how we're going height, mass, like proportion to each other. Like Panthro's the biggest, Tiger's second tallest, a little bit thinner, and Lino's got a little bit chunkier than Tiger, but a little bit shorter than Chitara. Obviously going to be female. We're going to definitely lean to like sexy athletic chick, not just make her look sexy, and then there's like zero athleticism to her. And then just Wily Cat, like how big they would be potentially. And again, these could be changed or tweaked as we move things along, but I think it's fun to kind of show like how we go into sometimes a line and really plan out how this is all going to work out. So feels
That's really cool.
Yeah, cool. You approve it?
I do, man. I dig it. I would say the only thing is in the colorway for Tigra. I personally prefer the less like aqua type of colors.
Oh, dude, don't worry about color. This is not like, this is just a show general, like, oh, that's Tigra. Like when we get to paint, it's a whole nother like I don't use these as paint guides or anything like that. It's just like literally just general first look kind of a thing.
Yeah,
but
super rough.
Yeah.
But no,
and also I forgot, isn't Tigra shoeless in the original cartoon show?
Yes, he is.
And why is that?
Because he's a cat.
So Panthro, Lino.
You know what I think what happened with the whole Panthro? I mean, Lino, because he's like the hero / leader. They gave him boots. Panthro is supposed to be like the martial arts expert. So, in the 80s, ninja was a big thing. So I can understand the design choice back then. It made sense. But what you were saying, he's a cat and like he can like rip through those ninja shoes with his talons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it makes total sense what you're saying.
Yeah. And you can see too, all this is before we made the modifications Panther give them. So if you're looking at line, I'm like, oh, they're doing shorts again. Just what we did with Panther will carry through. You know what I mean? So
right.
Yeah, buddy. So that's kind of like just proof of life. This is not a guarantee that all these will happen. Again, like if nothing sells, we're not going to keep making them. So if we sell 10 Panthers, even though I don't think we will, I think we'll do great. But if we only sell 10 Panthers, like, all right, cool. Let's dive in the next 5 figures. You know what I mean? It's like we're a business. We have to make sure it makes sense and take it case by case. But I want to show people like the chances are hopefully on the good side. I think they are that we can get this. You know what I mean? And then get the last thing is this is a thing I teased at. What I teased at PowerCon is Mumra, like how we do him pre-transformation. You can see like we're really gonna go. This is a rough paint over. I took a photograph of my Super 7 toy, actually, and I photo bashed the crap out of it just because, like, start with something rather than drawing from scratch. I took it and just drew over it, painted over it, edited it, tweaked the proportion, played around with him. But I definitely started from something. But to show, like, what we want to do with him, with, like, him coming out of his sarcophagus without the giant sarcophagus, but try and get, like, the teeth from it on the base bottom, get some steps in there. It's not going to be black. This is just me just conveying idea. Get his cool staff in there, make it cool and gnarly, just like what we did with Skeletor. Maybe get him some jewelry bits or something in there. Might be kind of a cool way to clack him up a little bit more. Like when I want to reference some things when he transform, like his full transformation mode. Like, look at that and be like, hey, where'd that jewelry come from? Maybe he has it on pre-transformation, So gonna play around with that a little bit. So
I love it.
Yeah, man. So that's what we got planned so far. It's make sure I think I'm done sharing, right?
Yeah. So
yeah, so
a couple of questions I have, and then we'll take a look at the chat here. Did you ever consider an alternate portrait for Panthro with a different expression?
Yeah, then you have to get a seam line in there, and just like, I think you're just for like, what does that really help? Like, and then does the awesomeness of an extra portrait forgive us for the seam? Because with a lot of characters, they have like, a clothing line here, so it's easy. Like Superman, you can get as many as you want because he has like that opening of like head and neck to his costume, right? Panthro, it's like all clean. So like to do that, we'd have to like hide a seam under here, go up around, which we did for engineering, like you saw in the parts breakdown. We have it there in case we have to have it. But we're gonna seam it up because it's really hard to do it. Like on Hulk, how do you swap out heads on a Hulk? It's like you can do it with a creature that has like heavy wrinkling and cool stuff like Doomsday or something like that. Or like maybe Slythe, when he has that like heavy, like you can give him cool toad skin and some gnarly texture. There's probably a way you could like really hide that in there with like a heavy wrinkle or rolled skin or something like that. But with Panthro, it's so clean. It's just like, you just don't want to ruin that, So
yeah,
I figured go for the one like determined badass look, not roaring, not happy, but just like he's focused, and he's a little bit pissed.
So a little bit. It's an understatement. Yeah. No, it's awesome. Another question is, okay, going back, because I know in the chat some people were asking, so you were personally responsible for the Thundercats Legends from Sideshow, correct? The Lion-O. Did you work on the Chitara as well?
Yeah, I was the art director on all that stuff there. So I worked on the design. With
that was you, right?
Well, I mean, I didn't. Other people design it and sculpt it, but I was the art director on it. So I was like trying to like figure out the idea of the look. And thanks. I love my favorite part about it actually is the base. It might sound weird, but like bases are hard, and I feel like we really captured his. I don't know what you call it. His throne room. He doesn't have a throne, but you know what I mean. His main room where you have like all the evil god. What do they call like the ancient gods or ancient beings
inside the tomb? Yeah.
Yeah. And each of those heads are represented on the outside. And then you get like the bubbling stuff. You get like the little ramp with like the little like stalagmite things. It's like, it's so hard sometimes to get like a creative base that just works. I feel like that one really worked. The original Sideshow Skeletor with the Snake Mountain head coming around really worked great. Sometimes you just get a base, just like, hell yeah. Just like that works great. So that Mumra was really happy with how that came out.
Yeah, dude, that was really badass. I think technically, I mean, because it's been so long, would you consider, revisiting him and kind of doing a different take on
some revisiting him pre-transformation? But yeah, I mean, we're revisiting Lion-O, so there's definitely a possibility. It's like just how like the goal of starting with Panthro first is, I think, I might be wrong, tell me what you think, in terms of the Thundercats team, it goes Lion-O in terms of popularity, then it goes Panthro or Chitara. Panthro and Chitara, I'd say, are equal because Chick, Crush, and then badass guy. Then I would say and people might disagree with me, then I would say Tiger's after that, then the kids, then Snarf, right?
Yeah.
So we want to start with a character that wasn't done yet and see how Panthro does. Then we're like, we have basically it's between Tiger, Lino, or Mummified Mummer. What's going to be the next one? It's between those three, I think, because Lino, obviously the leader, right? And then the one that came out, like you said earlier, some people, I still love it for what it was, but I understand why people had issues with it. So it's kind of like, can we revisit that, offer a Lino 2.0? And then also for people that missed out on the original one that want it, have to go on to eBay. It's like, why not make the leader again? And then Tiger would be the new character that we haven't done. And then Mummified Mumra would be like the third. It's like a character we've done, but it's the other main version of him, right? So it's like, great. So we're doing Mumra again, but we're doing the version of him we didn't do before. So,
right.
Yeah.
I think like what would make sense, I don't know if you agree with me, but instead of going like full hero, like maybe, you know, if Panthro does well, then you go to Mumra next, and then you go to Tigra. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like, rather than doing
we've
like
talked about that too. So that's why I said it's one of those three instead of going. I mean, it is the Thundercats. You know, it's kind of like the X-Men, and yeah, you want to do X-Men and then do a villain, right? Like Magneto's got to come eventually, but it's like you don't always want to go hero villain, hero villain, hero villain, because sometimes the heroes outnumber the villains, and sometimes it's like Spider-Man, and then all of his rogues gallery is like 80 deep. So it's like, cool, do Spider-Man, they could do 5 villains and do another Spider-Man, do 8 villains, do another, you know, Batman is a little bit more like a split between that and Thundercats, where you have like the Bat family, but Batman's the biggest one. And then you eventually want to do a Robin, eventually do a Batgirl, but for the most part, it's like Batman and villains, right? And then another Batman, or maybe a Batgirl, or maybe a Robin. So Thundercats, it's definitely more hero heavy in a good way. But then the bad guys, I think it's weird. I'd be curious what your thoughts are. Not saying you have to answer this now, but like if you had the option to be king and you were starting from scratch, like how would you do it? Would you go, oh, Lino, Mumra, Panthro, like Slythe, this, and then you're waiting 4 years until you complete your Thundercats team? Or would you go 2 heroes, 1 villain, you know, 3 heroes, another villain? It's just like there's no right or wrong answer, you know?
I think I would mix it up because of the fact that, like what we were talking about earlier, sometimes things don't get to go as far. And I think maybe sometimes it's because, you know, like for example, with Super 7, they're like, there's no end in sight with what they're doing, right? As far as characters and everything. But they're $55 figures. That's still expensive in the action figure world. But when we're talking about statues, I would be a little ballsy, and I would be like, here's Slythe. You know what I'm saying? And like this amazing freaking Slythe. And then I'll follow him up with like a Tigra. So what I would do is I would be offering characters that haven't necessarily been spotlighted before. They've always been kind of like in the back. And I would kind of put them out there. So I'm telling the audience, hey, we're giving you this now because, yeah, we'll get to Lion and we'll get to Mumra, but we want you to know that our plan is long-term.
The hard part about that, though, you can project your plans long-term, but then business might not agree with you. You know, just like then you have, cool, my company went under, and now I gave people Panthro and Slythe. I mean, at least it's a continuation of what wasn't done before, but it's like, you just never know. So it's like, it's hard. There's no right answer. None of us have a crystal ball, you know, and I'm hoping Panthro does good enough. And then if his number's here, then, you know, less popular characters like Wily Cat aren't going to be here. They're going to be here, right? So it's like Panther is a good indicator of like what our threshold would be. Hopefully a new Lino would be above him. Mumra might be equal to him or slightly above because he's the main bad guy. And then Slythe might be equal to him, maybe slightly under. He might shock us and go slightly above because he's just a cool looking monster and people want him. And they might be like, dude, that fits in my He-Man collection because it's this another cool like lizard guy, you know, like I might never get a Whiplash. So here's my lizard guy, you know, like, or something. So it's just weird how people can like, I was looking at a toy collection recently and how someone usually, you know, here's my Thundercats, here's my He-Man origins, here's my, not saying this is literally mine, but like what it is. But some people will be like, I keep all my He-Man origins together, all my He-Man classics together. I saw one guy just like mixing all this weird shit. When I looked at the collection, I'm like, that looks really cool. You know, like just some people might just pick and choose. They might not be like, I'm only going to get these Thundercats if this. you might see an uptick in Scythe just because it's a cool lizard creature, Monkeyan because he's a cool monkey guy, you know, like my like I want to design these so they're all in scale with the He-Man stuff. So if you buy our He-Man stuff, you buy these, they all work. So if you're a villains person, you buy Scythe and Monkey and whatever, they'll size up with your Trapjaw, Beastman, Merman, and Skeletor and stuff like that. So you can just make up your own little, like, this is my world I want, you know?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So Renato said, just take my money.
Done. Okay.
Really liking this stuff. So one of the questions I had in particular, and I'm not really a statue guy, and mainly it's because, you know, I don't have endless amounts of cash for my collectibles, but I do appreciate things like this. And usually when it's a Thundercats property, I kind of tend to go all in no matter what it is. So I've gotten the Iron Studios, you know, I've had in the past, I had the premium format Lionel. Remember that one? It was like based
the PCS one.
It was based on what was that artist's name?
Dave Wilkins.
No, it wasn't Dave Wilkins. It was based on Ed McGuinness's take on.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I'd say it was like literally, but yeah, like roughly. Yeah, so that was Jerry when he owned PCS. That was there. Like, because I think he did Lino, he did Mumra. Mumra was like in that pose like this.
Mm-hmm.
They did a few with fabric, and that was cool. That was quarter scale, I think, too.
Yeah, those were huge. So I had that Lino, I had the Mumra, but you know, things happen. I had to like part ways with them.
Yeah. Then Hard Hero made statues way back when. You know, that was
Hard Hero. I think Hard Hero were the first ones to do that, to do Thundercats. But and you know, Mezco did the 15-inch jumbo ones, which I have back there. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's an IP, for me at least, that no matter what they do, I gotta have a piece of it. You know, it doesn't matter the scale, it doesn't matter. You know, even props. Like I have an actual life scale Sword of Omens that's signed by Larry Kenney, the voice of Lionel. I met him a few years back. So it's like I'm like all in when it comes to Thundercats. You know, I want to get the Mumra helmet, all that stuff. So my question is with Panthro, the reason he's limited to 350 pieces, is that the usual number in production when it comes to like a Tweeterhead exclusive, or
it varies depending on character and property and whatever. It was kind of a number Chad and I came up with looking at all these different options to make people feel like, oh, this is the only one. Like there are no swap outs. It's like Panthro himself is the exclusive for Tweeterhead.com. We ran the numbers and just look like as collectors ourselves, be like, if we said, you know, if we left it open edition, then that doesn't incentivize people to pre-order. And if our pre-orders are down and they're waiting for it to like come up for sale later, that messes with our business. And then the possibility of things, you know, like future characters happening. So we're like, how do we incentivize people to buy in early? So lower edition size, giving people a discount they pay in full. And then we're also doing a thing we talked about in the announcement where anyone that pre-orders and goes in on this one will have early access to the next one and additional discounts. Like Panthro, if you pay in full, you get $50 off, like, which is like 10% or something like that. So it goes from $590 to $540, right? And then additionally, no matter if you pay in full or what, you get included on this mailing list, which we're calling like the Collectors Club, where it's going to be Thundercat specific. But then the next character, you might get the announcement first. What we're doing, we might poll the people that bought Panthro specifically to like, hey, we don't want to just throw it out there for everyone. We want to poll the people who supported us with Panthro. Who would you want to see next between X, Y, and Z? We might do that. Then we might also add an additional discount. Like, thank you for purchasing Panthro. Now, when the next character goes up, you get an additional, we don't know yet, $10, $15, $20, $25. We're not sure what that number is yet. We get an additional chunk off as a thank you. And then people who didn't buy Panthro don't get those same perks on the next one, right? And then they also, if we go limited edition, they get, you know, like that early access. And like people that missed out on Panthro be like, oh, that was lower edition. They only made that many. a little bit of that FOMO. So we thought if we went above 350 in the 400s, it might be like, they'll be up for sale for a while. We thought sub 400 would be a good kind of like kick in the butt for some people that might be on the fence. And then we just went a little more aggressive. We ran the numbers, what would make sense for us. So 350 wouldn't be us like, oh, big bonuses. You know, we're like, it's like it justifies the project and definitely justifies future pieces from happening. But we're definitely cutting ourselves short from potential money on the table. But we're doing that because we want collectors to feel that are jumping in and supporting us, that they're getting like a reward for that. So we're taking a little bit of a hit financially, potentially, from offering it only on Tweeterhead, and then lowering the edition size to something lower than normal. So
makes sense. So if the line grows legs and it expands, you would eventually like sell through Sideshow as well, or it would always be in-house?
It depends what Chad wants to do right now. I think we're considering a Tweeterhead exclusive line. We might offer, we've talked to Sideshow about letting them have an exclusive version of a character, like with He-Man with DC. So we might talk about that. Like maybe we do, hey, maybe the Tweeterhead version of Lino is the toy color scheme. And Sideshow gets the core color, like what fits with Legends, and can sell as many as they want. And then Tweeterhead sells like, all right, we're making 150 of the toy color variant or something. Like, I don't really know what that is, but like anything's
That's a really cool idea. I like that idea.
Yeah, so that's that kind of stuff's on the table. It's just got to make sense. We gotta, when you sell wholesale, you don't get as much money. So like, when you have someone else sell it, you have to sell twice as many essentially to make if you sold one direct. Right. If we sell one, we have to sell two wholesale. So I mean, it's not exact numbers, but that's plus or minus like what it is. So
David Banner says, please make Lionel's hair epic. And the Lionel pose.
I mean, dude, I love awesome. You saw my Monstar, man. I'm gonna make his hair cool as shit. Cover the ears.
We had a question from Renato. He says, surely you had someone tell us about your first artistic influences. Like, who is it that you look?
So I would say, I don't know if I could draw back to like when I was a child and be like, oh, that's when I first started drawing. But I would say hardcore. Like after I just started drawing and I was taking drawing seriously, Greg Capullo, Spawn, 10,000% was my top like artist. Not Todd McFarlane, Greg Capullo. I felt like that guy is just he hasn't, like, a lot of artists kind of go downhill a little bit over time, like they get older and lazy or whatever. Greg just keeps seeing like his stuff on Batman and everything he was doing, like the Court of Owls, like whoa, like he makes everything awesome. He just like anytime he draws something, and his style has kind of evolved and tweaked, but you still get the core of Greg. He was one of the biggest ones, for sure. I would say if I had a channel, like distill it down to one, Greg would be the top. And I got to meet him at, I think it was 2019 San Diego Comic-Con. Mark Brooks, who's a pretty well-known comic book artist, he's a buddy of mine, and he introduced me to Greg for the first. So that was the first time I got to meet Greg. So I've been trying to like meet him, and people are just like, oh, it's a fan or whatever. Mark's like, no, this guy is like a good guy. Come in. He's like, oh, cool. I'm like, I got to meet him through Mark. And I was like, oh, so that was pretty awesome for me. He makes everything. He can draw anything and make it exciting. He can draw. I think he said this in one of his interviews. I remember this when I was learning to draw and I was like in high school, whatever. I forgot if it was in like Wizard magazine or something, but he was talking about this panel he drew of like, I forgot what character was in Spawn, but like pouring a thing of tea and how he just drew all these gnarly reflections like in the tea kettle thing. He's like, if you can make someone pouring a cup of tea look badass, you can make a guy breaking through a wall badass or something like that. And I was like, oh, just stuck with me. So, yeah, Greg. That's my Greg Capullo.
I agree. Greg's really good. For me, I think it was Todd McFarlane to start, but my all-time favorite comic artist is Arthur Adams, dude.
Art's amazing. Yeah, and he draws some very awesome women, man. He gives them curves. Like not a lot of people are like, a lot of people are always trying to make him skinnier. He draws some awesome, healthy looking chicks, and I love it. I love his babes. He draws monsters. Cool. He's a monster fan. I love his monsters.
Yeah,
and his texture. I remember one of the Wizard magazines. It was like how to draw, like with Art Adams was this thing. He talked about like texture and reflections and all these things and how he just handles it in line art. I'm like, fuck, that guy's he's a genius. He's great. And he's also an artist look up too. Like he's kind of like a, you know, godfather for a lot of artists. It's like, oh, a lot of like artists we love now, they're like, oh, Art Adams is the guy that got me into drawing, you know? So
absolutely.
He's a cool dude. He's just nice. He's rad. So,
but yeah, dude, I can honestly say I'm pretty confident this Panthro is going to sell well. And, you know, and I definitely can see, you know, a lot of new Thundercat stuff coming in the horizon. I can't wait to see that Lion-O like finalized, because that pose is so epic, man. It's just like, that's like a centerpiece. Even like if you were not able to, you know, afford the whole thing, like I know a lot of people are gonna want that Lion-O. It's gonna be like a conversation piece, you know. But of course, the whole idea is to build that library of characters in that scale. And you know, there's statue collectors and there's toy collectors, and you know, there's people like me that collect everything from that IP. But yeah, with the production number and everything, and it being exclusive, do you have like a cutoff date? Like, you know,
no,
you don't.
Chad, you know, he looks at things differently than I think other people look at things. It's kind of like, you know, you look at almost like best comparison, I think, is like the box office, like opening weekend is the highest and it just trails down after that. So usually a factory wants a minimum order, like an MP, minimum purchase order, like at some point. It just depends on when that is. And Chad and I have different opinions on certain things, but like it's his business. Totally cool. I support him. And you know, it just, I'm not sure when he like is like, all right, we're cutting it, or if he would order a dish, like let's say we only get 200 pre-orders for whatever reason, if he would order that, or if he would buy an extra 50 or something, then we would, like we had to do that on the He-Man Life Size Bus. We actually announced it originally with a 500 edition, and then, you know, didn't sell nearly as well as we thought it would. And it makes sense. It's like a reinterpretation of He-Man. It's life-size $1,000 item. It's a buff blonde dude. You know what I mean? It's not like Skeletor busted great because it's a cool evil villain. You know, just like even people that don't like He-Man want it because they like dark fantasy and stuff. We sold almost 1,000 Skeletor busts. So we're like, hey, we can maybe sell half of He-Man. We only sold 150, and we actually just made an announcement saying, hey, actually we sold just under 150, so we capped it at 150. But we made an announcement saying, hey, we're actually adjusting the edition size on this. So if Panthro, you know, hopefully we can sell through all 350 and we just cap there, great. If the pre-sales really lag at a certain point, Chad might call up like, dude, screw it. We've only sold 180. Let's call it 225 and announce that and see if we can get those last 40 people to come in and buy, or that might be sitting on the fence. I'm not totally sure. So timing on when that would happen, probably in, you know, I think He-Man Bus went up for sale like almost a year ago. I think it was June last year. We made that call like last month, I think. So it might be, you know, 5 months, see how it goes. And then he might be like, all right, dude, screw it. So sorry, not sure. No, don't know how to answer. I think there's a few different ways to think about it.
1-to-1 scale Mumra, the ever living, would be.
I haven't thought of that before.
So epic, bro.
Yeah. Life-size Mumra bust would be great. I mean, obviously, one of my first thoughts was that after Skeletor busted well, and I was thinking like, oh, if we get Thundercats, I'd love to do. I think to me, it would be like he'd be the one that makes sense, and after that, I think it'd be maybe Lion-O. You know what I mean? I don't think like you can do too many of them life-size. I think Mumra full transformation with that headpiece would be awesome. You know?
So, absolutely, man. That would.
He's on my mind, baby. We'll see.
Great people think alike, man. But no, dude, it's been really fun talking to you, you know, learning about the behind the scenes process, the creative process, the business aspect. You know, it's just interesting because, you know, a lot of people think it's like, oh, you're not making things I want, but you got to think about, you know, adapting to new generations. You know, not everybody nowadays wants everybody walking around in underwear, half naked and stuff like that. So, you know, you gotta change. You gotta take creative liberties, modify things, and I think the Panthro came out amazing, man. It looks really menacing. He looks like he means business, you know, and he really captures the essence, you know, that facial look of Panthro, which is, you know, very iconic.
Yeah,
that's something that you guys captured, and you brought realism to it, you know, by adding the the fur texture and everything like that. So I can't wait to see it.
Geonac pill, man, crush that stuff, because I would have suffered through all. He hand sculpted in like ZBrush, though. It wasn't like here's a fur texture, which I think a lot of people might have done, and it would have looked cheap. But he sculpted all that anatomy in pose. It wasn't like, oh, here's my neutral anatomy pose, like, and then let me just try and pose it and tweak a couple things. Like, we had rough block out of forms and we posed, and he went in and asymmetrically sculpted in all the anatomy, the face. So you get those subtle asymmetrical things that make it feel more natural, you know, instead of it being like mirrored face, put it on there, and it just feels like something's off about it. So this definitely has that extra layer of love and care. I love work with artists that treat things like art and they care about it. And Gio is definitely one of those guys. And you see it in all the pieces we've been fortunate enough to work with him on. So yeah,
that's awesome, man. So yeah, no, if you haven't already, go to Tweeterhead now and place your pre-order for the Panthro, because I have a feeling this thing's gonna sell out, and I don't think it's gonna take 5 months. We'll see.
Hope so. We'll see. That's why, you know, coming on here, and thank you for having me, you know, to talk about it, maybe reach some people that didn't know Tweeterhead was doing this, you know, and yeah, it was fun talking and answering some questions. And if anyone has any questions, you know, like I'm on Facebook and my personal Instagram at David Igo stuff, then obviously you can. Tweeterhead has a Facebook page and Instagram page, and we also have a collectors group. You can, I think, Facebook search Tweeterhead Collectors Group. It's run by our social media guy, Matt Wessel, and he's in there all the time answering questions too. So yeah, just, you know, we're very accessible, you know, like in the statue forum, I'm on there a little bit, Matt's on there. And yeah, so partake, let, you know, make noise, share it. Even if you like it, you can't buy it for whatever reason, if you could share it, that would help, because you just never know who the person. We're a small company. We're not like some big, you know, huge statue company. We're a smaller operation. A lot of people know us and are loyal to us, which is great. Then some people don't. You know, you're surprised by, I thought you would have known we were making all these He-Man statues or whatever. Like, nah. Like one guy I remember at PowerCon, never heard of us. We brought all these statues to PowerCon, and one guy was like, what? And just went back that night to the hotel room, pre-ordered everything, and came back. He's like, I pre-ordered everything. Where have you? This is like, yes, it's crazy. You know, I'm like, oh, that's why I love going to cons, interacting with people doing this. You just never know. Not saying like, obviously we're a business. We need to sell things to survive, but I never want people to be like, oh, Dave's pushing a hard sell. I just want to be here, answer questions, get people excited. You're like, someone on Statue Forum was talking about like, oh, you know, just, I love what they're doing with the He-Man stuff, but something about this just isn't working. You know, I wish it was grittier, more detailed, and I explain my, you know, I try not to get defensive, be like, oh, you're an idiot. But it's like, I just jump on there and be like, hey, you know, this is my thought process and why we did that with Thundercats and why we did this with He-Man and why they're different. And he's like, that totally makes sense. You know, like that is, and I don't know if it pushed him to buy it. Not that I was trying to push him to buy it, but just sometimes that extra layer of understanding just makes it more meaningful, you know, and whether or not that pushes you to buy it or not, just if you enjoy it a little bit more, then great. So
yeah, definitely. This is not Rankin Bass 1980s Thundercats. This is the Thundercats IP re-envisioned for something like a modern motion picture or a TV series, you know? So, yeah. And it has legs. It looks amazing, looks organic. You know, the pose is menacing. It's just all around awesome, man. And
thanks, man. It has legs, but doesn't have shoes.
That's a good thing. You'd be tripping all over the place.
You would, man. You wouldn't like it. Like you said, I want to draw a little cartoon panel of Panthro, like his ninja shoes, and getting in this fight, and then you just see his like claws sticking out at the end of it. He's like, dang it, another pair ruined. That'd be great. You know?
Yeah, he has to like replay them after every battle.
Kick. He does that stretch kick from the intro, and just foot just like blows out. See, that's like all I can think of is you just see is like, you know,
yeah,
oh, that'd be funny.
Right through.
Oh my god,
that's awesome, David. Man, hey, it's been a blast, man.
Thanks, man.
Talking to you, and we'll be keeping a close eye, and I'll definitely be spreading a lot of love on this new project and all your other stuff. The Motu stuff looks amazing. That Beast Man is just out of this world. That's why I was looking about, you know, thinking about the possibilities of a monkey and because seeing what you did with Beastman is just like, wow.
Yeah. And again, I think that's where you have more freedom, I think, with those guys to push them a little bit more, make them a little bit gnarlier, because there are monsters to me in a way, like they're like Thundercats aren't. They're like elegant creatures that they're almost like, in a way, I hate saying this, is gonna sound super nerdy, almost like elves, right? And then the mutants are more like orcs. You can go a little bit more gnarly with them and stuff. So I'm real excited. Now, dude, I might do my little mini bust sculpt of like what I would do with Slythe now. I just, that's all I can think about is like what I would do with Slythe. So maybe I'll do that.
Dude, you could totally print those and people would buy them.
I mean, I don't have the license to print and sell that. That's a very different thing. But I do it for myself, and it's a starting point for the line if we get to them. It's for me. So
no, it looks amazing, man. I can't wait to see your other concept busts and stuff like that.
So monkeying would be top. If you could have anything from me, you'd have me do monkeying next.
Yes, absolutely. I just think I just love the energy that character has. The slumped over poses that you could put him in with, with a ball and chain and holding the heavy shield. I just feel like out of all the mutants, aside from Slythe, Monkey has the most iconic personality, And I think I'm thinking more along the lines of body language. I love the furry mane on shoulders. You know what I mean? It's just like he's one of my favorite Super 7 mutants.
Cool.
My second one is Vultureman. I think Jackalman comes in like dead last. Slythe is amazing. What they did with him, it looks like it just popped out of a 1985 VHS tape. It's just like incredible.
Yeah.
But the potential of what you can do with the Legends line with that character is just
I think after Slythe, I'd probably be most tempted to do Vultureman next, just because you haven't seen him really. Like I felt like I did Beastman. Not saying like it would be the same with Monkeying, but like what I mean. It's like they're both more the primitive ape angle of stuff. I feel like even though it's different, I feel like Vultureman would be one I'd love to see. How would I make that work? But I think I would go Monkeying before Jackalman for sure.
Awesome, man. Yeah, Vultureman would look sick.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun to figure him out. Make him look like, he's not like a clean avian. It's like he's got a little bit of that like gnarliness to him. So that'd be fun to find that balance. But yeah, Jorge, dude, thanks a ton for having me on. And again, like if you're like later on, if there's anything else we could show or have updates on, we could have maybe another discussion on whatever. Hey, Panthro did great, cool. Next figure, we're doing a poll, and and just we could talk about stuff or have a little jam, talk about like whatever. So. Yeah, man.
Yeah, sounds good, man. I look forward to it. It's been awesome. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Yeah. It's been a great time.
Thanks, everyone, for joining in. Yeah.
Go place those pre-orders, folks. Don't miss out on this awesome piece.
Buy. Money, right?
All right, guys. Have a good night.
All right, thanks, guys.